morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for June 12th, 2023. If you missed it on Saturday, you can find the video of the Schiller Institute conference, JFK's Vision of Speech, on the schillerinstitute.com website. This was an extraordinary dialogue, a discussion which included political leaders, activists, a video from Oliver Stone, a comment from Dr. Andrei Kortunov from the Russian International Affairs Council, and an extensive discussion led by Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute. So I'll have a link to this at the bottom of the description section. Again, take the time to watch and listen as though you're a participant in this discussion, because the discussion took up the question of what will it take to change the policy in the United States and in the transatlantic world today if we're going to avoid a descent into World War III. Now, this is especially important from the standpoint of what's beginning today in Germany, which is called Air Defender 23, a NATO military exercise which is the biggest air exercise in its history. It includes 250 aircraft, including 100 from the United States, aircraft from 25 nations, 10,000 participants. They'll be engaged in air exercises over Germany, Poland, the Czech Republic, Lithuania, and Romania at least, including exercises that go up to the border of Russia. A pro-NATO analyst said that this is a political message of deterrence. Quote, "We will defend every centimeter of NATO territory," unquote. The Russian response is to consider that this is being coordinated with the ongoing Ukrainian counteroffensive. They see this as a possible preparation for NATO moves into Russian territory, which of course is one of the red lines that Putin said must not be crossed. Now, at the same time, we're already in the midst of what's called Baltops 23, Baltic operations. These are training exercises which, according to NATO, provide an opportunity to, quote, "build trust across air, land, and sea forces," unquote. 50 ships, 45 aircraft, 6,000 personnel, and it's being run out of Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Keep in mind that according to Seymour Hersh, it was Baltops 22, the exercises last year, that were used as a cover for the planting of the explosives on the North Sea pipelines. Now, the report from Ukraine is that the offensive, or the counteroffensive, is underway. It's continuing. They've reported the capture of 3 villages with a population of around 1,000 people each, and they've moved forward 1 kilometer. Now, if they're going to cut off the Russian land route through the Donbass to Crimea, they have to go 200 kilometers more to get to the Sea of Azov. So this is a first step. The Ukrainians are saying it's hard fought, but don't worry, we're going to continue the fight. The BBC this morning had an interview with the former commander of British forces who said this is going to take a long time. He doesn't think this war will be over by the end of this year. Of course, that fits with NATO planning to have a war of attrition, a long war, or a frozen war that will allow for the continued efforts of NATO to destabilize and weaken Russia. Now we have more that's come in on the FBI intervention regarding Twitter censorship. This is a report from Aaron Mate from the Gray Zone, in which he says that there is an FBI agent in the U.S. Embassy in Kiev that sent a message to Twitter in March 2022 with a list of accounts compiled by the Security Service of Ukraine, the SBU, and the FBI agent demanded that these accounts be shut down and personal account information be passed on to the SBU. The reason given, quote, These accounts are suspected by the SBU in spreading fear and disinformation, unquote. Now, we've seen from the Twitter files that there was a consistent pattern of intervention by the FBI, by members of Congress in both parties, to shut down opponents. But we also know that the SBU, the Secret Services of Ukraine, was working with the Center to Combat Disinformation to compile lists of people they called Putin puppets and information terrorists. And that when you see these kinds of lists and you see the names, the question is, why is the US government coordinating this with neo-Nazis in the secret services of Ukraine? And that's something that has not been investigated yet, that the US and NATO and European Union are coordinating in the compiling of these target lists. Now, this particular list from the embassy in Kiev contained 163 accounts, 34 of which were suspended. For his part, the security chief of Twitter, Yoel Roth, said that even though some of these accounts were closed, that accounts that, quote, cover the conflict with a pro-Russian stance are unlikely to be found in violation of our rules, unquote. Well, take that for what it is, but Twitter definitely was involved in this kind of censorship. But what about the FBI? The FBI is about as corrupt as you can get. It's part of the permanent bureaucracy that Lyndon LaRouche pointed out in the Department of Justice that's involved in all kinds of nefarious actions, including the most recent indictment of Donald Trump. What it shows is that the U.S. law enforcement agencies are coordinating with Ukrainian security forces in a program to not just combat disinformation, but to silence opposition. Now then, here's a story that's quite interesting. There's now reports that Afghanistan's Taliban government has had a highly successful campaign in shutting down opium poppy production in that country. Afghanistan is a source of well over 90% of the world, or around 90% of the world's opium production. And that according to this report, over 90% of the crop has been eradicated. Now, according to the World Bank's country manager for Afghanistan, former country manager for Afghanistan, a man named William Byrd, this is bad for Afghanistan and for the world. Byrd now works for something called the U.S. Institute for Peace. Previously, when he worked for the World Bank, he was an advocate for the U.S. seizure of more than $9 billion of Afghan funds from the Afghan National Bank that were deposited in U.S. banks and the Federal Reserve. Those accounts are still frozen. Now, what Byrd writes shows again the hypocrisy of U.S. officials, because in his report on Afghanistan's successful shutdown of the drug trafficking, he said that the, quote, economic shock, unquote, of shifting from poppy production to wheat production will increase the risk of hunger, malnutrition, and the flow of refugees from Afghanistan. Clearly, he wasn't concerned about that when he advocated the shutting down of Afghan funds. Now he's calling this an unviable economic plan for Afghanistan. The U.S. Institute for Peace, for which he works now, was founded in 1984 by the Congress to work with civil societies to manage conflicts peacefully. On its board of directors are the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State, and in 2023 it had a $55 million budget. Now, I would call your attention again to the video of the conference on Saturday of the Schiller Institute, which included as one of the participants Pino Arlacchi, the former director of the United Nations anti-drug program. And he had initiated a program in the early 90s, which was highly successful in cutting back Afghanistan poppy production. Actually, I'm sorry, it may have been around 2000 that this took place. But after the U.S. invasion, poppy production went back up again. Arlacchi has some very interesting comments on the fight to eradicate poppy production in Afghanistan. And that'll be available on the archived video of the Schiller Institute conference, which will be linked in the description section below. So thanks for joining me today, and make sure you share this video, talk to people about what we're doing, and join our movement, because as you can see from the beginning of this report with these NATO military exercises, there is an ambiguity as to what the United States is doing and what the threat is to the world from these kinds of activities. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.